Hey, welcome to Taste for Adventure, episode 2. This one we're calling How to Judge.
That's right.
We're going to be talking about the 5 BJCP categories. Aaron, what are those categories?
The 5 kind of categories for tasting beer are aroma, appearance, flavor, mouthfeel, and overall impression. We covered those a little bit more in our very first episode, and today we're going to really dissect exactly how to describe and taste for flavor and dissect all those different pieces.
Yeah. So as I'm looking around here, sort of at our countertop, it looks like we're a little bit, we've got the things that you might see at a beer judging table. What are we looking at exactly?
You need to have water. It's important for judges to stay hydrated so they don't have too much to drink, and then also just to really clear out the palate between the different beers, especially when you have flights of very intense beers or beers that could really vary widely. Yeah. You want to be able to kind of rinse your mouth out. So along with that, usually pretzels and or oyster crackers to help with kind of cleansing your palate in between different beers. Tasting glasses. I know usually we use glasses on the show, but really these disposable 5 or 6 ounce cups are pretty much perfect, and you'll see those at any big kind of contest judging table. Now I do have a glass pitcher here, and for homebrew competitions they don't really use pitchers, but for competitions where they are judging commercial beers, they use the pitchers as a way to keep it fairly blind for the judges. They don't want the judges to recognize, this is this beer that I know of already, and encourage any kind of bias. So what they do is a steward, who is basically like the person who serves the judges the beer, they'll actually pour the beer into a pitcher from a commercial can or bottle, out of view from the judges,
and then bring it to
them. They bring it out.
Fair enough.
Notepads, some scratch paper is always good. Mechanical pencils, and it's important that you have not pens but pencils, and also mechanical pencils are preferred, because if you have fresh pencil shavings, you get that fresh wood smell.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So those aromas, believe it or not, some of these judges are so tuned in that they do the preferences mechanical.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
Well, plus you're not having to distract yourself with sharpening. You go off to the sharpener, you see something you shouldn't. It's like, oh no, pitcher 4 is this one.
So then we also have raffle tickets, or sometimes these tickets are used for like food or drink coupons. So those are pretty common sight at a judging table. And then sometimes little giveaways. Usually judges will get a little something for their time. In addition to be able to drink for free for a whole afternoon. It's not really drinking socially. It's drinking it's not
drinking
really,
with a purpose.
Drinking with a purpose, yeah. So usually there are little judging gifts, bottle openers, things like that are pretty common. And then of course, some extra paper towels. Sometimes you have a gusher. Sometimes you open a beer, spill or whatever. And then also the BJCP guidelines.
That's probably very important to have.
Yeah, there are usually a few paper copies. But then there's also apps out there. You can look for the BJCP Guidelines app. And then also plenty of Scoresheets.
Right.
So those are all of the main things that you really need at a judging table.
Sure.
Now, if you want to kind of judge along at home, or just want to kind of set the environment to really get into that judging zone, I would just really recommend a location that is fairly distraction-free. You want a pretty neutral palette for all of your senses. So, don't judge in somewhere that is very aromatic. You don't want to judge in the kitchen when somebody else in the household is cooking, is baking or something.
Sure.
Because that could interfere with the aromas. Yeah. Don't judge in the back of a Yankee Candle store, because of all the crazy aromas.
Don't judge in the bathroom.
Right. Yeah, all these places you don't want to judge. So try to have a place that's pretty clear, pretty fragrance-free. I think limiting the distractions, so I don't really judge with like the TV on for noise and light. You want to judge somewhere that has fairly good light, to make an accurate analysis of the beer appearance and color.
Yeah. I think it's amazing. You want to be free from like TV and stuff like that. It's like when you turn down the car radio to find where you're looking for.
Exactly. Same idea for beer judging.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And just really, to focus in on what's in the glass in front of you and giving it a proper analysis and feedback.
Yeah.
So those are some things. Otherwise, at home, really, I would say, a pencil and a scratch pad of paper, or print out some score sheets. We will link to some score sheet references in this description for the video. So take a peek at that.
Perfect.
And then just a nice neutral cup. You can judge in mugs and things like that as well. You don't have to go out try to save the planet. You don't have to always use a disposable plastic cup. Especially if you're just having one or two beers. But really, for judges, when they have a flight of, they could have 12 beers in a flight.
Yeah.
You're not going to drink 12 of these in a row.
And you could have a lot of judges, too.
You could have a lot of judges. Yeah. So, judge along at home with, I would definitely say, clear glassware. You don't want to, you don't want to judge in like an opaque stein or a cup that's tinted. But yeah, a nice clear glassware. Probably some water and something to cleanse your palate with, and then something to take notes on. Yeah. That's all you really need at home.
Yeah, cool. Well, that was a mouthful. Why don't we get our mouths filled with beer?
Let's do it. What do we have for tonight?
All right. So first up, we have the Coffee Eugene Porter by Revolution.
You first want to analyze a beer by dissecting the aroma.
Okay.
And obviously, the first thing you notice is going to be the appearance. But it's important to try to evaluate the beer's aroma first.
Okay, I was actually going to ask you about that. Why, the big difference between aroma versus appearance, because you pour a beer, the first thing you're going to do is see the beer.
Right,
usually.
But the beer's appearance won't change that much.
That's true.
But the aroma could. When you get that first nice burst of foam, you really are releasing a lot of aromas, and you want to try to capture that, appreciate it, and evaluate it before that dissipates.
Mm-hmm. Porters, stouts, darker beers are typically my favorite. And another one is that we're marrying coffee in, which I also really love coffee as well. I'm getting a pretty good whiff of coffee, and that coffee, chocolate. They play off each other really well.
Yes, they definitely do. And I think, even if you didn't add coffee to a beer like a porter or a stout, even the malts will contribute some degree of coffeeness. So it's kind of a perfect marriage there to add a little bit more coffee to it.
And this beer was brewed with coffee.
Yeah.
Or at least coffee was added to this. It didn't indicate on the can, but I would be interested in knowing what they used.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it would be easy to say, okay, this beer, has a big aroma of coffee, and then move on to the appearance. But in really picking apart a beer, there are different types of ingredients that you can try to pick out with your nose.
Yeah.
So things to try to sniff for would be what the malt contributions are.
Okay.
Okay. So, trying to dig past the coffee a little bit, I am getting kind of a moderate roastiness with some caramel and some chocolate in addition to the coffee.
And you can achieve that with just caramel malt. There doesn't actually need to be any caramel in the beer.
That's right.
Yeah.
So are you getting the same?
I am getting it. Once you dig past the sort of coffee and chocolate, you definitely can smell there's like there's a maltiness back there that I see what you mean by the caramel. They probably did use caramel malt.
Yeah.
In this, I would say.
And that's certainly in style for a porter.
Yeah, absolutely.
So another type of aroma or ingredient you might look for are the hops.
Yeah.
Even in a beer that's not an IPA that's very hop forward, you should always look for the hop presence and what it contributes to a darker beer that can be very malt forward.
Yeah.
Are you detecting any hops at all?
I personally am not. I don't quite have the beer judge's nose like you do. So I would kind of defer to you on that one, but I'm not getting a whole lot of hop presence in the aroma at all.
It's like maybe a little bit earthy and a little bit like herbal.
Okay.
But, it's not just a malt beverage. They're not just malt.
Right.
It's really more just in there to provide a tiny bit of balance.
Got it.
So, I mean, I might indicate that as a very low hop presence.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And I mean, with most stouts or porters, you're not going to get a ton of hop presence, I feel.
That's true. Yeah. So if you're judging to judge and give feedback, or you're judging in a competition, it's important to also note that, hey, there are little to no hop aromas in this beer, and that's okay because that is how the style should be.
Yeah.
So what's equally important to noting what is in the beer is what is not in the beer, and then how it relates to the style. If you're judging for a competition.
Sure.
Yeah. So another thing that you can look for with your nose is the yeast character.
Okay.
Now, most porters won't really have a fermentation quality.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can have a light like esteriness, which could come off as like a little bit of like a fruit, like an apple or a pear.
Yeah.
Especially if they're using English yeast.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I'm getting a faint bit of red apple in here. Think like apple skins, just a tiny bit. Not strong like an apple cider.
Right.
Not like a sour apple. That would be an off aroma. But I am getting just very faint appley esters. Are you able to pick that out?
I'm not quite able to pick that out. I might need to have a couple more.
Okay. All right. We can arrange that.
No, I get a lot of the. I'm getting a lot of the coffee, the caramel, the chocolate. You know, but yeah, not so much. Not so much really that earthiness, but you know, like I said, you know, we're on episode 2. You know, I'm still far from beer judge ready.
Well, and I've been judging for about 3 years now, and tasting beer a lot longer than that.
Yep.
So, I mean, these are very, very faint aromas. You almost have to be trained to, once you can identify what esters are in a beer that's prominently with esters, then it's a little bit easier to pick out in beers that have a faint amount of esters.
Right.
So these are very fine-tuned aroma points. So, all right, we should be analyzing appearance next, but I just want to take a little sip of this.
Oh yeah. That is very nice.
Yes, it is.
We can definitely reserve talking about the flavor until after we look at the appearance, but yeah, that is a very nice beer.
Yeah, so tell me, Andrew, how would you describe the appearance on this beer?
Well, you know, I mean, if you're looking at it straight on like this, you're going to get like a heavy, just black, you know. But if you look at it from like kind of above, maybe in the light, you actually do get like kind of that coffee appearance where it's black. You can tell it's definitely black liquid because you can see through the top. I can actually see through very extremely dark brown.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, that's what I'm seeing there. It had a pretty nice head on the initial pour. It kind of sticks around. I don't know if you can kind of bring it back a little bit if you swirl it. It looks like it's pretty well carbonated.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of what I'm noticing. I mean, you can't see your finger through on the other side like some beers I've had, but you know, if you kind of tip it every which way, you can definitely tell like, oh, this is like definitely on the coffee end of the spectrum rather than like a straight up just stout where it's just completely black.
Yeah.
You know, definitely.
Well, that was a very good analysis of the appearance.
Yeah.
Some of the main areas for appearance that you should always note are the color,
Okay.
the clarity,
Yep.
and then the head size, retention, and then the head color as well. So I would call this almost maybe a caramel color head, or like maybe beige or dark tan. And really, that's about it. Now, there are some beers that, you know, you might notice some sediment in there if they're bottle fermented, or, you know, the degree of haze. You can also mention the highlights. So I think that, you know, you were dead on with saying that it's not quite jet black, very dark brown.
Yep.
And then when you hold it up to the light, it definitely, it definitely has like probably like caramel colored or like a deep amber highlight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, obviously you can't see through the beer, but it's not hazy like some beers that I've seen.
It's not hazy, so it is just, you can't see through it just because of how dark it is.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, just would you call that clarity? Is that something you would refer to as clarity?
Yeah, that's part of the clarity spectrum, and you could still say that it's opaque, and maybe just note that it's opaque not because there's a lot of hop particulate or anything in there,
Yeah.
just because it's so dark.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense to me. So in a, like a coffee cupping, they'll actually like take a little bit of they'll take a spoon and they'll get a little thing of it and then just sort of let it drip. Have you ever heard about anybody doing that in a beer judging context?
I have not heard of that for brewing.
Yeah.
Now, definitely, I think holding the cup at the side a little bit.
Yeah.
I have seen people take out little pen lights and try to shine it through
Oh,
the beer
that'll do it.
to see those highlights and to see how cloudy it might be.
Yeah.
But not actually spooning it up like that.
Yeah. Well, I spelled a little bit on the page here. Now, if this were like a kind of a stout or something like that, you probably wouldn't be able to read the page. But it does have that sort of like coffee-ish thing where you get like a ring of coffee on your notebook or whatever, your paper.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing. So, yeah, definitely. It's good. I think we're jumping right into taste now.
So flavor-wise, can you describe the flavor?
I'm getting that like hard coffee, hard chocolate. It's definitely. I mean, that's kind of the focal point of this beer. The regular Eugene porter is it's more of your porter kind of your what you would call a porter, but they really play up the coffee and the chocolate in this. I mean, that's kind of their if you're going to do a variant, you might as well do it specifically. Right?
Yeah. So again, I think very similarly to aroma, you're going to try to describe how each of the ingredients present themselves.
Yeah.
So in a beer that's specialty like this, they say, hey, there's coffee in this. It's really, that those flavors are gonna be at the forefront. But then, if you kind of dig past that coffee, what are some of the malt flavors you're getting? I think you did mention chocolate, which it certainly has.
Yeah.
Are you getting anything else?
Let me see. I mean, if we're calling it caramel hops or caramel malt, you could probably pick some of that out. But even then, you get a lot of chocolate caramel, or a lot of chocolate coffee, I should say.
Yeah, and I think that the lighter and sweeter malts play more into the balance of sweetness.
Yeah.
More so than the actual flavor. I think the flavor, you're absolutely right, is all coffee and chocolate in this beer. But it doesn't finish out harsh and roasty and dry.
No, you're right.
Because of those residual sugars. So that's part of the balancing act for a beer that you can weigh in on the flavor is, for a coffee beer, does it end really, dry and roasty?
Right.
Or does it end with some sweetness to it?
Yeah, and there is that sweetness there. I wouldn't call it, like a coffee with sugar sweetness. It's like a coffee with like chocolate in it. You know? Like you get a little like what and I wouldn't even call it like a one pump mocha or something like that. There's no, sugariness to this beer at all. But it does have a subtle sweetness to it.
Yeah,
and there's definitely sweetness there.
And I think that really gives this beer a nice like overall kind of balance towards the end there.
Yeah.
So mouthfeel wise, that's a lot more straightforward. For mouthfeel, you'll go kind of on the spectrum of body from like very thin, almost watery, to medium, full, heavy bodied, or even like chewy or oily.
Okay.
So think of like your biggest, heaviest Russian Imperial Stout, you might call chewy or a very heavy or full bodied beer. As compared to like your American macro lager could be a thin-bodied beer, light-bodied beer, or even watery. Yeah. In some cases, you will also on mouthfeel describe the carbonation. Is it low, medium, high carbonation? You can describe the warmth. So typically, beers that have lower alcohol are not going to have as much alcohol warmth to them. Okay. But then also, even moderate strength beers, if they're fermented a little bit too roughly, fermented at higher temperatures, you can get the higher alcohol warming that is definitely kind of an off mouthfeel.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can. And then there's also creaminess and astringency. So how creamy the beer is, and then astringency is almost like bitterness. It's almost like a harshness. Yeah. Hops can provide it. If you mash your malts at too high of temperatures, you can get tannins from the hulls of the grain. So think of like the almost bitterness, like if you would suck on a bag of fresh tea. Ooh. Like that almost like kind of harsh, almost puckering, almost drying. That's what astringency is.
Yeah.
So those are the types of areas that you can describe for mouthfeel.
Yeah.
What would you say the body is like in this beer?
This is actually kind of thinner. I would say it's probably more on the thin to maybe like, medium tops, I would say. It's got a lot of characteristics of like a cup of coffee. You're not going to expect your normal coffee to really be chewy or, kind of really heavy bodied or full bodied. This is actually kind of thin. I mean, it's not bad. It's just,
Yeah, I would agree with you, especially for a porter. It's a bit thin. I would say, compared to, a very like light effervescent beer, it's not there. So I would probably overall call this medium bodied.
Yeah.
And
tops.
that's maybe lighter on the style for a porter, but kind of still medium in the whole realm of beer.
Got it. Yep.
Carbonation, I thought was kind of moderately low.
Not a ton, yeah.
Which again is okay. That's okay for a porter.
Yeah.
I got maybe a tiny bit of warmth.
Maybe.
But really, it's actually very smooth.
Yeah. Smooth, and then my tongue is definitely dry after taking a sip of this. It really makes you just want to go through the whole 6-pack.
Yeah.
So
and that dryness could be from the roasted grains. Roasted grains can also provide some astringency.
Yeah.
So there's some astringency in there, but well within range for the style. Yeah. And then I would say creaminess as well.
Very creamy.
There's a lot of creaminess in here. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, coffee itself can be a little dehydrating. If you drink a cup of coffee, it's like, I need some water after that.
Yeah.
So
that brings us to overall impressions,
Yeah.
and that is the stage where a beer judge would again kind of give the overall impression. Did I like it? Did I not like it? But then also kind of summarizing the most standout traits of the areas that we went into detail with up to that point.
Okay.
That could also be where a beer judge offers some suggestions for improvement, and then maybe notes off flavors and what could have caused any of those off flavors.
Sure.
Maybe suggestions on process or even on recipe in a beer judge. If you are tasting for fun and not for providing feedback to anybody, this could be where, hey, I really like this beer. I would get a lot more of it. Or, this was great at a barbecue. Or I would love to have this, as a fireside sipper, next winter. More that where everything else we try to make a lot more objective.
Yeah.
I think overall impression can be a little bit more subjective.
Yeah, fair enough.
So what is your overall impression of Coffee Eugene Porter?
Well, unfortunately, and maybe fortunately, unfortunately, I had this beer. This is one that I supplied, and I happily drank the other 5. So,
so unfortunately for me,
unfortunately for you, you get one.
Okay,
so
it's all right.
Very, very good beer, excellent beer. I mean, if I'm judging it overall, yeah, maybe it's a little thin, but did I hate it? Would I ding it? A ton of appearance or mouthfeel points? No, I mean I ding it a little bit, but overall, for what it is, Coffee Eugene Porter, I'd say good. I would have another one of that.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree. I think this would score extremely well in a competition. You certainly get that firm coffee notes.
Oh, yeah.
But it wasn't just one note coffee. As I noted throughout this tasting, I was able to pick up subtle flavors behind it.
Yeah.
I was able to pick up the base beer behind it. And I think that's what's really important in a beer, that you add another flavor to, whether it be fruit or it be coffee or anything else.
Yeah.
You still want to detect that base beer. And anytime a base beer is good and so is the adjunct, that's a winning combination.
Yeah, absolutely. No, this is this is a good start to our flight.
Stick around for part 2, where we will put our tasting tips to the test with 2 more beers.